It is a great pleasure for me to welcome the Speaker of the Polish Sejm, Mr. Radosław Sikorski. I am very happy to see him not only for reasons of his public office, but also because as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, he initiated our initiative to establish the Year of Jan Karski. He tabled a motion with the Parliament, we were obviously supporting it, and he was also one of the first to initiate the thought of making Jan Karski known to all diplomatic offices of the Republic of Poland around the world, which is why those are not mere words of thanks, but those are words of thanks addressing someone who did a lot for us, not only for reasons of his office, but also for reasons of his understanding that Jan Karski is a role model for all Polish citizens who blended in a number of roles, and he managed to connect Jews to Poles, and I hope that he will also now manage to connect Poles to Poles, which is a huge task. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for your former achievements, but also I understand you are going to pay to feed the conference of educators of so-called difficult memory, and I know that such motion was tabled by an MP from the Cultural Commission, so please do help us there as well. Mr. Speaker, over to you. Well, after such words of introduction, I don't think I have another way out. I will. Well, this is what we are counting on. I wish to apologize for my tardiness, but I was working on the governmental information concerning foreign policy. I do hope that the opposition will not hold against me that I handed over to the Deputy Speaker in the course of a speech being delivered by the opposition club. Ladies and gentlemen, the title of this conference is Memory and Responsibility. No other two words would be more apt to describe the achievements of Jan Karski and Rafał Lemkin. Jan Karski has become a rediscovered hero of collective memory, a model of heroism and devotion, honored, as has been said here, with a year named after him, several books and dozens of articles. The enormous contribution of Rafał Lemkin to the development of international law has not been so widely recognized, yet without his academic work, collecting evidence of crimes, and finally, remarkable persistence in convincing the governments of many countries, it would be very difficult today to imagine any discussion about the principles of international order and responsibility shared by various countries, including Poland, to try and prevent the genocide we witnessed in the 20th century from happening again. We all know the story of Jan Karski here, so I'm not going to recount it yet again. The year of Jan Karski, slowly drawing to an end, has been rich in events which reminded us of his heroic path. Through the nightmare of the occupied Poland, the Gestapo torture chambers, to the offices of the British government and US president. In each of those places, Karski gave an eyewitness account of crimes committed by Nazis in occupied Poland and the extermination of Jews. And, as we know, each time he was met with incredulity and lack of reaction. Following a failed attempt to convince the Allies to intervene, and after the war had ended, Karski started a career at Georgetown University and rarely talked about his experience. This, however, does not mean that he forgot them. Karski was known for his phenomenal, almost photographic memory. As a courier, he was able to remember entire reports word for word, dictating them later from memory to their addressees without making a single mistake. That was an extraordinary gift, but also a great burden. The September campaign defeat, the transit camp in Izbica, or the account from the Warsaw ghetto. These images were haunting him until the end of his life. Wartime memories were, of course, extremely painful, Karski was also ignored by guilt. More than 30 people were killed by Germans in retaliation for the daring operation of freeing Karski from a hospital in Nowy Sącz, where he was kept by the Gestapo. Karski was filled with remorse. Like many others, he kept silent for many years. Only in 1978 did he tell his story in the film Shoah. His account immediately attracted huge interest. Ever since, he was tireless in his efforts to preserve the memory of the Holocaust, telling and reliving his traumatic story hundreds of times. Jan Karski is occasionally reduced to the role of an immaculate monument, full of such incredible nobility and persistence that it is easier to treat him as an abstract figure from the distant past than a real person. We must not let that happen. Karski's heritage, his memory, and his acts should be recalled as often as humanly possible, to prevent them from passing to the realm of the too distant past too quickly, so that they can remain as an example to be followed. Rafał Lemkin was an outstanding theorist of law, coiner of the word genocide, nominated several times for the Nobel Peace Prize. Unlike Karski, he is still not widely known either in Poland or internationally. He was born in the year 1900 in a Jewish family, and just like Karski, graduated from the John Casimir University. After graduating, he continued to study in Berlin, Heidelberg, and at the Sorbonne. In 1927, he obtained a PhD in law. Obsessive thoughts about the then unnamed crime of genocide accompanied him since childhood, when he read the novel Quo Vadis, whose descriptions of the massacre of early Christians fascinated the young Lemkin. The future creator of the term genocide tried to understand and analyze the mechanisms underlying the cruelty of Romans. Years later, the murder of Talat Pasha, one of the architects of the Armenian massacre, was another turning point of Lemkin. He was killed, Pasha was, by an Armenian assassin in 1921. Lemkin could not understand why a man responsible for the death of hundreds of thousands of people could enjoy freedom, while the person who took his life would be tried for murder. In 1933, at a conference of the League of Nations in Madrid, Lemkin presented a report in which he distinguished 5 new types of crime. The new definition of barbarity was particularly important. Lemkin defined it as an activity aimed at physical elimination of members of a particular religious or racial group, which is not an element of traditionally understood warfare. He also showed extraordinary visionary insight, for example, by classifying as barbaric the destruction of the culture of nations or ethnic groups, material culture included. Lemkin laid the foundation for his international law based on historical events, such as the massacre of Armenians or Assyrians. What he was not able to foresee, however, was that the coming years would bring yet another, even greater tragedy, the tragedy of the Holocaust. Lemkin himself managed to flee to the US in the 1940s, but almost all of his family members lost their lives in the Holocaust. In the United States, he wrote his book, Axis Rule in Occupied Europe. It was in that work, published in 1944, that he used the term genocide for the first time, defining it as a destruction of a nation or of an ethnic group. Interestingly enough, Lemkin used the term genocide to describe not only physical extermination, but also an attempt to totally destroy a group in social, cultural, or historical terms. In his book, Lemkin also called for creating an international system of justice that would prosecute and punish individuals responsible for this crime. No provisions punishing genocide were included in the Charter of the International Military Tribunal, which tried perpetrators of crimes committed during the Second World War. However, thanks to Lemkin's efforts, United Nations Resolution No. 96 of 1946 already contained a firm condemnation of the crime of genocide. On December the 9th, 1948, despite the beginning of the Cold War, the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide was unanimously adopted by UN member states, and it entered into force in 1951. Ever since, many unimaginable tragedies occurred in the world. Lemkin, however, at least gave us a language to describe them, enabling us to prosecute and punish them today. Thanks to Lemkin, no state and no person may escape responsibility for genocide. This puts a great strain on the international system, but it is also a sign of its maturity. Such maturity would not have emerged indeed had it not been for Rafał Lemkin, a man who managed to change the way we think about responsibility, which even states have to bear for their actions. Both Karski and Lemkin were shaped by the trauma of the Second World War. Each of them, however, handled it differently. Karski, an eyewitness, devoted several decades of his life to nurturing the memory of Holocaust victims. Lemkin made every effort to ensure that the perpetrators of mass crimes could be called to account for their actions in the future. Both these great Poles deserve not only our memory and respect, but the memory and respect of the whole world. Thank you very much.
Ogromne dzięki.